got my last minute little touch-ups to do. Let me join you guys over there on the TikTok side. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Good morning. How is everybody? Well, morning for me, I suppose. First coffee of the day. All right. Jesus, why does that screen look like that? Sorry, TikTokers. Give me a second here. Is that better? You guys look crazy there for a minute. Is that better? All right. Okay. So, for you fast movers, and for you guys that are closer to digital nomads than anything else, even if you don't have remote work or whatever the case might be, we do have a special for you guys today. For as long as it lasts, I think there's three apartments left. So we are doing kind of an express relocation service right now. We will be bringing you guys over to Deani Beach. You will have a fully furnished two-bedroom apartment at the beach. You can bring extra people, right? But your immigration is for one person. So if that person wants to stay, permanently or have the right to come and go longer than, what the 90-day electronic travel authorization would allow, then they would need, to talk to us and get that squared away. But you can bring other people with you. You can do it as a group. And so your two-bedroom apartment is fully furnished. All right. It is directly across the street from the beach. So you are living at the beach in Deani Beach, number one beach in Africa for several years in a row. Again, in Africa, not just Kenya. And so you got a great location there for folks who are coming with young children. And I have to get the ages that are there. But for folks who are coming with young children, there's even like a private, almost like a homeschooling group, right? So it's a school, has a certified teacher, all of that stuff going on. But in the apartment complex, there's this school for like kids like up to age 12 or something like that. So it's a two-bedroom. So you would be able to come if your kid is young enough. And again, we'll figure out what the ages are. I got to go over there and talk to the administrator, but we'll figure out what the ages are. But if your kids are young enough, they can actually go to school like in compound right there where you can like see them, right? And call it a day. So pretty cool setup for people who want to move fast. We know we have gotten the emails and all of that stuff for people who want to move fast. A lot of people were not qualified. So this is like a bare bones offering. The price essentially just covers everything that is offered in the offering, and that is it. Very low margins on this one. So that's why it's such a low entry point. And then you can figure it out. Then you can figure out what you want to do. You can figure out where you want to live. You can, figure out if you want to build a house. Da, 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 da. There are a lot of people who don't necessarily know what to do, right? I know you guys have seen like our client interviews on YouTube and stuff like that. And most of our clients are pretty solid. Like they know They want to build a house. They come to us for that. They want us to do the immigration. They want us to build them a trust. Like they know and they get it, right? But there are some people who just don't. They're not sure. And so being able to have free rent for a year does appeal to them. So we provided it, but apartments are not unlimited. They're not an unlimited resource. So there are only three left, I'm pretty sure. And so, yeah, so that is the package. You guys can head over to the website. If you're watching this, you're watching it on a business account. So the website's in the bio. You guys can head over to the website, take the assessment if you want. But this particular relocation option should be like front and center on the website. And you can get more information there and then go from there. So the option that most of you got, well, not most, but the option that many of you guys have been asking for is now available. So we'll see if you take advantage of that option or not. Hey, YouTube. See a lot of highs coming over on YouTube. All right. Yes, yes, yes. We are doing episodes. I think an episode dropped yesterday. So we are doing more of the episode stuff. The social media manager is neglecting you guys, you TikTok guys. So the YouTube folks are definitely seeing more of that. So I'm definitely gonna have to correct that a little bit and make sure that you TikTokers get to see some stuff. But yes, yes, yes. Just keep an eye on our YouTube. Yeah, Facebook does get more. I update Facebook myself. The social media manager doesn't update Facebook. Um, at least not solely. I'm sure she does because she has the access to. But I do Facebook myself. Hey Caroline, how are you? We don't do anything with YouTube. Yeah, that's not our business. So yeah, we don't make any money off of YouTube at all. We don't monetize any of our social media, quite frankly. So we don't monetize TikTok, we don't monetize YouTube, we don't monetize Facebook. It's not worth it for us. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Kenya will pay us more than YouTube. So, you know what I mean? At least for us, right? Like if we were doing like Mr. Beast type of stuff, then obviously that makes sense. But we're not. We're just giving out information, right? So, you know, the amount of views and the amount of likes that we're going to get with like our target client, it doesn't make any sense. We'd rather like take the advertising dollars that we'd have to pump into YouTube to do that and buy bonds in Kenya and let Kenya pay us monthly on those bonds. You know what I mean? So yeah, yeah, it doesn't make sense for us to like have a monetizing campaign on social media. At least not at the moment. Maybe they run off. Maybe they rubbed off on me. No, I had a pre-law degree in the United States. It's called a criminal justice degree. It can be used as pre-law. That's how I intended to use it, but I didn't go further than that. So I got my criminal justice degree, and then I started opening businesses, and then it didn't make sense to get any other degrees. But I do own a law firm, so maybe they rubbed off on me. But no, I'm not a lawyer anywhere. I'm not a lawyer in the U.S. I'm not a lawyer in Kenya, but I own a law firm in Kenya. What do you mean you didn't know you could do that? You didn't know you could own things? Well, yeah. I mean, in America, black women are dying at 300% um, compared to other women in childbirth, right? So I intend to own a hospital that, tackles that issue as well, but I'm not a doctor. You didn't know that you could own things and not really? Also looking at starting a school. I'm not a teacher either. You can own whatever you want. Uh, Desert Channel subscription and like done. Well, hopefully the information matters to you, right? Not just like for like. That's actually how you mess up algorithms, right? Like if the information doesn't mean anything to you, don't subscribe. Like we're not about numbers here, right? So I don't care if I have 2 subscribers. As long as those 2 subscribers, the information matters to them, that's what matters the most. I'd rather the people who need the information see it than have 10,000 subscribers that are all essentially fake, you know? So if you subscribed, I appreciate it, but I hope it's because the information actually resonates with you. Where are the apartments are in Diani Beach, Kenya. All right, so it's Diani Beach. It's not Nairobi. We don't do a whole lot in Nairobi, quite frankly. But it's Diani Beach, Kenya. The apartments are directly across the street from the beach one row, right? So beachfront is like the 2 acres from the road to the beach. That's like the prime real estate. And about an eighth of an acre on the other side of the road is part of that, right? So essentially the road to the beach is what's called beach one. And so that's obviously the most ideal land because it's you can hear the beach, you can smell the beach, you can feel the beach. I'm actually in beach one right now, right? So that's where the apartment is. The apartment is on that first floor where you can literally walk across the street. I did a video. I don't know if there's one. I don't know if it's on YouTube. I'll put it up on YouTube as a short or something. It's definitely on TikTok. Did a video the other day, just like walking to the beach. Or actually, I went to the restaurant directly across the beach from the apartments, and then drove back to the gate and like showed them from the beach restaurant. So like you walk right across the street, you're at the beach, right? So pretty prime location, fully furnished. You don't have to buy any furniture or anything like that, right? So it's like a really like non-committal situation, which is what a lot of folks were asking for. They were asking for like they were like, man, I don't want to build a house with you. Like that's a commitment, that I'm maybe not ready for. So like, can I get an apartment for a year and see what it's like, and that made sense. So we made it happen. We might not always have the availability because apartments are limited, right? So like we don't have unlimited apartments to just be handing out to people, but while we have availability, we're able right now to set people up with some really nice apartments, and then they get like a year to essentially try it out, right? So most of them would have 3 years of residency, right? So they'd have 2 years beyond the year that they spend at the apartment of residency built in. And then they would have 1 year of their, rent paid in full, right? And they'd be able to explore, right? And they'd be close enough that like they don't need a car, like it's really close to like the center of town. You just walk out to the road and like get a tuk-tuk or whatever, essentially a taxi, just walk out to the road and there'd be one right there. So like you're really close. And then it's like 5 minutes to the center of town, like to the center of Deani Beach from where the apartments are. So you're close to everything. You don't necessarily need a car. You can get a scooter if you want or whatever. A lot of people do that or whatever. So it works out pretty well as like a testing ground. And you don't have to. We definitely have folks that like come for like 90 days and then go back home and like work for 90 days and then like come back for another 90 days. So like even though yes, it's paid, for a year, they don't necessarily stay there for a year. And we have one group that they're like rotating. So it's like 4 friends. The 4 friends are each going to spend 90 days apiece. So they're each taking, like a sabbatical at work, I suppose. So they're each spending like 90 days here. So they're like, it's almost like a timeshare to them. They're like sharing the apartment, which is fine. You can do that. And then go from there. So there's, people apply it in tons of different ways. Hi, Horan. No, see, I don't. I feel like people make excuses for themselves mentally, right? And that's one of them. Like, oh, he must be a computer programmer, have this crazy job. No, he works at Amazon. Yeah, he does at Amazon. There's this thing called peak season. It typically happens between November and like February. Um, and that's when Amazon makes all its money for the year. Like the day after Thanksgiving, I think is when it starts, and then it goes and like returns for like Christmas gifts that don't fit and all of that stuff is like up until like Valentine's Day, and there's like another little like Valentine's Day pop, right? So it goes until like somewhere around February, I think, middle of February after Valentine's Day. That section of the year is where Amazon pays for everything. It pays all employee salaries. It pays all executive salaries. It pays for everything. All the whole rest of the year is a bonus to them, right? And so if you're paying attention to like hiring advertisements and stuff like that, you'll see that during that time of the year, Amazon hires temporary employees and they pay them like 50% more than regular employees. Now, those employees actually get less because they don't have like stock benefits and all of that. But as far as the actual, cash dollar amount per hour, a regular Amazon employee might make 15, like a packer, might make 15 or maybe even $20 an hour, depending on what state they're in. But during peak, they're hiring these temps in at 25, right? And there's almost unlimited overtime, right? Because if the orders are through the roof, they'll allow people to stay and to get those orders, picked and sent out by Christmas, essentially, right? And so there's plenty of people that just do that. They bust their ass for Amazon Peak. It's not some crazy tech job, right? And they make $50,000 across Peak because all they do is work and sleep, right? They take every overtime that's offered, they, whatever, but they don't accept the position, right? Which Amazon seems to actually like. Like they even have a program for Amazon workers that they'll pay you a bonus for every year up to 5 years that you work there for you to quit, right? So they pay you per peak, actually. It's not how many years you work there, it's how many peaks you've worked, right? So Amazon kind of seems to like the turnover, right? And yeah, there's a guy who had told us that he was doing that, and then we got like four or five other people who did that. They were like, "Oh yeah, you know what? I do that anyway. Let me just go ahead and do this thing." And so it's not like these crazy jobs that make six figures and all of that. It's just people finding a way. So there's people who like create excuses in their head, and then there's people who like find solutions in their head. And one set of people do infinitely better than the other. I worked at Amazon Peak. It was, what is that? What's that word? I think that's a typo. Try again. Oh, it was crushing. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. You got to move. I think they even have like time limits and stuff. The one guy was like he used it like he took the job originally to lose weight. Like he was in a weight loss group, and they were like, "Hey, when when not Prime, Amazon season comes along, and it's you know, that they're hiring those temps, get a job there because apparently you do like 30 miles a day. Like if you have a step meter and you're actually like tracking it, and some of it's up the steps, down the steps. So you're just picking the orders. Like there's this giant warehouse, and it's giant. It's like a football stadium, if not bigger. You're running around the entire warehouse picking orders. There might be a frozen section, so you're in the freezer, out the freezer, like, and there's a timer like on you. Like there's some kind of digital tracking device that if you're not moving fast enough, you get fired. So he was like, he wanted to lose weight, and he was in this weight loss group on Reddit or something, and they were like, "Oh yeah, get a job at Amazon for peak season, and by the end of peak, you'll lose lose weight, and he did. He said he dropped like 40 pounds in 3 months. So that's how he started it. But also, while it was great money, if you're there, if you live there, living there eats up a lot of that money. So he was saying, like, I think he made 40, 50 grand, in just those 3 months. But he had bills. So he took care of student loans and took care of credit cards, like whatever. So it didn't really have the same impact. Now these guys, they'll go get a room at a motel, right? Or like a room at the Y. There's a one guy, he does it in, I want to say it's in San Francisco, but he does it in California up north somewhere because they pay the most, right? Or at least they pay the most as far as he's concerned. And he gets like a room at the YMCA for 3 months and then flies back to the beach house in Kenya. And like that money easily takes care of him for the entire year. So it's one of those things. Because remember, the income requirement for the residency permit is 24,000 a year. You got to prove that you make 2,000 a month. So if you go somewhere and make 50 grand in 3 months and come back with almost the entire 50 grand because you're not paying any bills in America anymore, you're not paying rent, you've paid, you're paying $60 a week to stay at the YMCA in a room, and you're barely ever there, right? Because you're trying to get double shifts during peak season at Amazon, right? So you're doing 16 hours at Amazon, you sleep in this Y, you get up, you take your shower, brush your teeth, and go right back to Amazon for 3 little months. And you're spending the rest of the year drinking Mai Tais out of a coconut at the beach. You know, it's pretty easy, no brainer for a young person that just wants freedom, right? So a lot of those folks are doing that, and there's other folks that came through. I'm trying to remember where that other guy said that he worked, but there are other like factory folks that do the exact same thing. It's kind of like the ice trucker thing. And you guys remember that? Those guys who would wait until it was like the coldest season and then they go to Canada and drive the trucks over the ice. And it's just not as dangerous because if the trucks break, they die, right? Or like those crab fishermen. You guys remember that? There'd be like one king crab season and they go work the season. And if they caught enough crab, they wouldn't have to work the entire rest of the year. It's the same thing. It's literally the same thing. The only difference is that they're not working super dangerous jobs, so they're not making crazy, crazy pay. But they're going somewhere where 50,000 can last you 2, 3 years. You know what I mean? So that's the only difference. That's a funny question. Every single guy who's been interested in getting married has gotten married, and they're all still married. So over all of the years that we've facilitated this, anyone who like came without already being married or even being in a relationship or whatever who was interested in that has absolutely gotten married within the first year. Like within the first year, they met somebody, and by the end of the second year, they were absolutely married, and they're all still married. So while that's not something that we do, we're not matchmakers or anything like that. Since you asked, yeah, I mean, I'm married to a Kenyan myself, but every single guy that's happened with girls are a little different, but guys, yeah, some of them have, some of them have. Um, it's just different because there's no hypergamy here. So the way ladies make choices here is different. And so if you're into hypergamy, then making a choice here might be disappointing for you. So it's a little tougher for girls, at least the ones that we've relocated. Now you can definitely do it. You just have to change them and like you got to give up hypergamy, which a lot of ladies from the West are not interested in doing, or they feel like it somehow diminishes them in some kind of way. I don't know, but I'm not a lady, so I don't know. But it's harder for them because of the way that they approach the whole thing. Sure, yeah, yeah. There are people, yeah. There's plenty of people who make more money than them, but those people are typically already married. And then you run into the fact that you can have multiple wives, and they're not down for that either. So they typically can't tap into that ultra high earner like they would. Well, like they would try to, I guess, in the United States. Yeah, no, like I said, it's possible. They just got to change. Like we, know, I have some clients who've done it, but they had to change the way they looked at, dating. Now, since they were able to evolve and make that change, there's plenty of them that are like super happy. They're still married, just like the guys and all of that, and like everything is okay. But they had to, you know, get through their head that they can't decide that, their man isn't a man because he doesn't make more money than them or whatever. Hey, Marine, how are you? Oh, you're from Kenya. Ah, Karibu. I'm from Philadelphia. I live in Diani. Oh no, it's a dramatic. Like I won't lie about it. It's a dramatic difference. Like 100% of the men are good. Like trying to think what the oldest marriage is. Maybe 12 years. And they got like four kids, and like they're good. Like they're happy. They travel all the time. Like they're exceptionally good, right? But I would say if I had to put a percentage on it, maybe 25% of the ladies can like evolve to a point where like they can make it happen. So it's definitely there's definitely a difference. There's this chick, I can't even think of her name. Oh, and you know what? That might have been a restricted post. That might have been like a friends only post. So I won't even get too deep into it. But there was somebody from the U.S. that ended up marrying like a guy out here, and like like got pregnant and had a baby or whole nine. And she was like older, so she like restarted by having this baby, and then like he did something crazy. Like like she found like a text on his phone, like telling some other girl that he's gonna meet her in an hour and she should go get a Plan B pill. So like he wasn't even planning on wearing no protection or nothing. It was nuts. And so yeah, I mean, if you find someone that you can practice hypergamy with, they're definitely exercising options because polygamy is legal here. So they can have more than one wife. You know what I mean? So it's like, what's the primary languages? English. English is the primary language. Swahili is also a primary language. So those are official government primary languages. So virtually everybody speaks them. So like if you were to go to like Tanzania, they don't speak English. So now you really need to know Swahili. But in Kenya, it's English. Ooh, great question. Why shouldn't you come? And actually, that is a question that you really want to ask people, right? Because kind of like liars and like almost like scammers, they will not answer that question. They'll be like, no, 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 pay me and come to Kenya. Why should you not come to Kenya is an amazing question that real people will answer. Number one, you are broke. Okay, let's just put it where the goats can get at it. Right? You are broke and you're looking for a bargain bin country so that you won't be broke anymore. You're looking for a place that you can bring, your tiny, amount of money and all of a sudden it's going to be millions. This is not that place. Nairobi is a luxury city. Now you get a 35% discount on luxury, right? So, like, for example, I have a friend that lives in a place called Gatheri, right? Gatheris are really nice. Like, think Beverly Hills, think Hamptons, right? 1 acre in Gatheri is 3.5 million US dollars. Okay. That same acre in the Hamptons is $10 million. Okay. So it's a discount on luxury, but it's a luxury city, right? Same as like New York. There are ghettos in New York. There are ghettos in Nairobi. However, if you want to live on the Upper East Side, right? So if you want to live on the Upper East Side in Nairobi, you will get about a 35 to maybe even 40% discount on that luxury, right? But it is a luxury city. So if you're looking for some bargain bin, I'm gonna go buy land for $200, and this is not the place for you, right? You're setting yourself up for big time failure. So that is number one. It's the number one reason why you don't want to come here. Number two, if you have some kind of weird, like, better than them mindset, right? We would typically call it a colonial mindset, but you might not recognize that it's a colonial mindset. So that doesn't matter to say, right? It won't resonate with people. But if you think you're saving someone, or you're showing up to save the locals, or you're any of that nonsense, this is not the place for you, right? This is the Nairobi is the Manhattan of Africa, easily. Where I'm at right now in Diani is easily like your Key West, you know, of Africa. Okay, Mombasa is easily the Miami of Africa, right? And there are other great cities out there. I'm not saying Kenya's the end all be all, but the comparisons that I have just made are apt comparisons, right? And I've lived in all of those places, so they are apt comparisons. So you're not coming here to save nobody, right? So if that's where your mindset is, this is not the place for you. Go somewhere else with that. You can't just operate illegally here, right? There are other places where you can do that, right? Like that might work out for you in Nigeria for a while. That might work out for you in Togo or something like that for a while. You need a permit. Like, all this border running nonsense, that's coming to an end, right? So being on a tourist visa and illegally immigrating places and never getting an immigration permit, all of that's going away, right? So this is not that. This is not Thailand. This is not Medellin. This is not, I'm gonna go and make $1,000 stretch for a month. This is not that. You can't even get a permit if all you make is $1,000 a month, right? So you need to actually have some minimum level of substance, right? And it is a minimum level. I mean, the criteria for a Class K permit, which is a residency permit, is $24,000 a year. That's still like poverty in the United States, right? That might be less than minimum wage. So let's get that straight, right? It's not crazy, but it's not a discount area at all. And you're not doing a whole hell of a lot in Nairobi with that, right? Now, you can come out here to Diani and have a much better life, at much less cost of living, but it's still not the bargain bin. You know what I mean? You're still going to put up a little something. You can just get more for your money if you're outside of the big city, right? So that's great. But if that's your mentality, like if you're looking for the that go somewhere else. It's just not going to work out for you because you don't lose anything here, right? Or you don't have to. You can if you want, but you don't have to lose anything here. So you would have all of the same, luxuries that you're used to in Canada, the UK, the United States. You keep all of that, right? So it's not it's not the Philippines where, now your electric don't work right, and now you're out in Butuan, and there's lizards living in your house, and all this nonsense. Like, it's not that. Unless you want it to be, you can do that. If you want, you can do that, but that's not what it is typically. So understand that this is not that. So for the people who want that, or they're looking for the cheapest thing in the world, or they're broke and they're trying to circumvent that the brokenness, this is not the place for you. Go to Mexico or something. I don't know, but this is not it. So good question. There are reasons why people shouldn't come here, and those are definitely among them. Good question though. This is not for everybody. And I say that as somebody who has an immigration firm, right? So I get paid for people coming here. We will not bring everybody here. In fact, we have limitations on how many people who are qualified that we'll work with at any given time. Now, we did suspend those limitations in response to your guys' response to the Trump situation, right? But we have reinstated those limitations. We will only work with so many people because we have to keep the quality up, right? We're not just gonna, take people because they're paying us, and then let that quality, reduce because we're working on too many people at the same time, right? So we only work on 8 people at a time. We only have clients at any given time, and once we have 8 clients, that's it. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to see, like, it'll either be flashing green, flashing yellow, or flashing red. If it's flashing red, it's waitlisted and we're not taking any new clients at the moment. If it's yellow, we're close to not taking any new clients at the moment. If it's green, then we're good. What about a woman, single mom perspective? Are there some of the cons? It depends, Kristen. That's a good question. It depends. So we were talking about, we have this program right now where you get to live here and the rent's included for a year, right? So you get to live here for a year. If we do your immigration for you and all of that. In that area, right, which is right next to the beach and Deani Beach and all of that, there's a school. So it's great for single moms. There is like an age limit. And I mean, if your kid is over the age and they just go to like school, right? But there's a legitimate certified teacher like school where the apartment is, right? So you can literally like look out your window and see your kid at school, right? And so it's a 2 bedroom, fully furnished apartment directly across the street from the beach. So the clients get to come in, they get to live right across from the beach, they get to feel it all out for a year, they get a full immigration package, so their immigration is cleared for typically 3 years. And there's a school right there, right? So their kids get to go to the school. It's an international school. There's a certified international teacher. That the school is being taught in English, like, you know what I mean? And there is a Swahili class, so your kids can learn the local language there as well, but like whatever, right? So it depends on who is actually doing your relocation, right? Very few other, groups can provide something like that. Where here's a fully furnished apartment, is paid for the entire year. Oh, and by the way, the school for your kid is right downstairs, right? Like that's crazy. So you wouldn't get that experience depending on who you were actually doing your relocation with, right? So whether or not your experience is a pro or a con really has a lot to do with your professional team and how professional that professional team actually is, right? And so what experience you actually get, from them. Other than that, I mean, here at least that village mentality kind of helps. So if it's like from a romantic perspective, having that kid doesn't diminish any of your prospects like it might in the West, right? Because here it's like all the kids in the village belong to the village type of thing. So that mentality of like, this is not my kid, it's not as prevalent here. So I mean, from that perspective, that might be a bonus, depending on whatever what you're open to. On any country, and maybe as a single mom, if your child is educatable, below the age of 18, maybe this matters to you. But oh wait, hold on. Oh, safe, please. This where we are in Deani Beach and where those apartments are, you can absolutely Google it. It is less than 1% violent crime rate. Right. So I came from Philadelphia, where children were being killed every 38 minutes by drive-by shootings. Right. So less than 1% violent crime is bananas to me. Right. I haven't even seen a fight since I've been living here. for, you know, almost 7 years, right? Haven't even seen a fight. No one has even thrown fisticuffs, right? So safety wise, you know. Okay, you're from Philly. All right. So, all right, I'm from. I used to live at Washington Boulevard, so Northeast Philly. So, compared to where we come from, ain't nothing going on here. What you got to worry about here is petty crime stuff like if you leave your cell phone, you know, at the Starbucks, which is called Java House. You leave your cell phone, you come back, you know, 30 minutes later, it's a flip of a coin whether that cell phone is still there. That stuff, which is the same thing in Philly. It ain't finna be there, right? We understand this, right? That John is gone. So you know, yeah. As far as crime is concerned, you don't have to worry about it. I came up in Reading. Since you're from North Philly, you know most people don't know that I just keep it Philly. But I came up in Reading. I moved to Philly, you know, later in life. I used to go, you know, play on the trails and go to the park and all of that. And my mom would be like, "Make sure you're home by the time the street lights come on." Da, 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 da. You can't do that anymore. You do that, you'll lose your child. Like somebody's going to snatch them. You know, it's gone. So, okay. So, here, my kid can still do that. That was important to me. Like, I can just last night, my kid went to the beach with all the other kids, you know, and like his school teacher was there and like all the other kids from his class. Mind you, he's 23 months old. Right? He was at the beach. It was like 8:30 at night. I was like, "Where is my son?" You know, and my wife was like, "No, he's with the, you know, the kids, the, you know, the teacher and all of that." We had to go out to the beach. He's sitting there walking around. He had a glass of water in his hand, you know. So we had to pick him up from the beach and bring him home or whatever. But that's the life that he gets to live. He doesn't. He's not hearing gunshots. He's not hearing any of that nonsense. You know. I know that's right. I know that's right. We know all our neighbors. And what's really interesting is it's very much the village raises the child oriented, right? In the sense that like we know all our neighbors, but we don't necessarily know their name. And they don't necessarily know our name. So what they do know is my child's name, and what I know is their child's name. So like the neighbor right next to us, I call him Baba Joseph because his son's name is Joseph. I call his wife Mama Joseph because the son's name is Joseph. I don't necessarily know their name. They don't necessarily know my name. They call me Baba Marcel, right? So my child is not only recognized everywhere, it's recognized that I'm their father everywhere and that their mother is their mother. And we have like good friends, like call each other, they're in our phone, Baba Maria, you know, Mama Amy, you know what I mean? Like that's how, you know, people, you know, approach each other. So, and some of course, yes, like some of them we met before we even had a child or whatever, and I know their name, right? But there's a healthy percentage of them that I don't know their name and I'm not sure they know mine. They identify you based on your parentage, right? They identify you based on your child, which is cool because it means that the people in the neighborhood know where your kids are at. You know, the same way it used to be 50 years ago in the US. So, most people in your program, are they working remotely? No. No. So, I would say maybe 20%, not even 25, maybe 20% are working remotely. Now we do have a bunch of self-employed. So that's a larger, you know. So we do have a bunch of self-employed. We have a bunch of retirees. But that's about the same as a remote working. Maybe 20% retirees, 20% remote workers. Maybe there's a healthy like 30% that are self-employed, right? And then the rest like work normally. Like they'll go back and forth. So there's a lot of like teachers. So in the US, teachers have 3 months off. And they can choose to like work summer school, right? But then school closes for 3 months in most states. In Florida, it's a little different. But in most states, school closes for 3 months and then they live here for 3 months, right? And then they do that maybe till they're retired or whatever. Or they start teaching remotely because they want to live here, you know, more. We have a whole group of they're not necessarily tech founders, but they're founders, right? And so because they're founders, minimize their expenses because they're bootstrapped at first. Like they're going to go for VC funding, but they need to get traction first so that they get the best, out of VC funding, which is really smart. A lot of founders will go directly to VC and they'll give up way too much equity in their company because they don't have traction, so they get less money for more equity because they're more of a risk. These guys are smart and they're getting traction first and then going to VC and they're getting more money for less equity, blah, 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 right? And so they'll hang out here and reduce, their monthly burn rate, right? The amount of money they spend per month by 60, 70%, right? And they'll funnel the rest into this company that they're trying to build, and and so they'll end up building their company remotely, right? So yeah, there's a lot of that. But there's the guys I was just talking about probably before you came on. There are guys who are pickers at Amazon over Amazon peak season, which is Black Friday till like Valentine's Day, and they literally live like in a motel or the YMCA or like something real humble for the three months, 4 months of Amazon peak season. They make 50, 60,000 dollars for Amazon peak, and then they live here the rest of the year, right? So there's 3 quarters of the year that they live here, 1 quarter that they work for Amazon, and that's it, right? Because Amazon hires temps for peak season, so they're not even like they don't even work there, permanently. They just go back, do their temp work, and then the whole rest of the year they live at the beach, right? So yeah, there's a lot of people who like found the way, but the remote workers, yeah, I think they're trend driven. So like for a while there, they were all in Bali, like every single one of them, right? And then they all went to like Thailand. So like I think they go where like the peers say to go. Like they were in Singapore for a while, and so that became the whole digital nomad thing, where they just, because they're making $200,000 a year at Oracle remotely, they can just jump from place to place to place, and so they don't. People that come here through me are typically setting up some sort of roots. They're typically super nomadic and they don't really set down too many roots. So we don't see a whole lot of them like people think we do. But most people do see this and they're like, oh, remote workers, but we don't actually see that many. We do see people who will own their job remotely, right? So that's a little bit of a different category, at least in our opinion. And so, and we used to help people do this. But what those people typically do is they'll take whatever job they're doing. Like there was this girl named Lana, and she was an HR rep. And she was actually an HR rep for the EPA, right? And then she came to us. This was a few years back, but she came to us, and then we enrolled her in SAM.gov as an individual. A lot of people don't know you can do this. We enrolled her as an individual in SAM.gov, not as a company. And then she got a job with a corporation called the Millennium Challenge Corporation. The Millennium Challenge Corporation is wholly owned by the U.S. government. It's not a real corporation, right? It's essentially a branch of the U.S. government. It's owned by Congress. And so every time they need a position filled, it becomes a government contract because it's owned by government. They don't hire people individually like a regular corporation would. So she became like the head of HR, but they had to pay her as a contractor. So they had to give her all her money. And like she was in charge of her health care and all of that stuff because she's paid as a contractor. So they're paying her like $220,000 a year to work the exact same job she was working for like 80,000, right? And so we do that a lot. And then you're a contractor. So technically, even if it is a sole proprietorship, it's still technically a company. And you're in charge of who does the work. So you can move to the beach all you want and have somebody else do the work, and there's nothing they can say about it because you're not an employee. You're a contractor, right? So your company is going to get the job done, and that's all that matters, right? So we get a lot of that where now they're still doing the same job. They don't really own a business. They own a job, you know. Yeah. There's plenty of, where there's a will, there's a way, quite frankly. Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way. We've seen people do all kinds of stuff. The craziest guy who took the craziest risk. I don't think I would have ever taken that risk personally, but the craziest guy who took the craziest risk made the most money and it's in a single move that any of our people have ever made. Right? And he came here. He came here the way we tell people not to come here. He came here basically broke. He had about $10,000 left to his name. And he ended up doing a deal. It took him about 18 months to do the deal, but he ended up doing a coffee bean deal that was financed by the XM Bank, exim.gov. Y'all better go check out those government resources. XM Bank ended up financing this deal. The total deal was like $4 million in coffee coming from Kenya going into the United States. And then his piece of that was 1.27 million. From $10,000 left to his name, he was an assistant manager at Dunkin' Donuts to $1.27 million, right? And well, now it was a crazy move. Life got tough for him. He was literally living in a house with a cow dung in one room, no toilet, cooking with fire. Like life got tough for him because we don't recommend nobody take their last $10,000 and move anywhere. But he was like, "All right, I hear your warning. I'm doing it anyway." you know. And then he had Google Voice. He was calling these American, coffee people, and for the first 6 or 7 months, he was calling the wrong people. He was calling like Walmart and Acme, and they have procurement departments. They're not taking your phone call, buying your coffee beans, no matter how good they are, right? But all the wrong people, and then he stumbled across. He didn't even figure it out. He just stumbled across it while he was calling people, and he had already made 1,000 phone calls by this time, right? And got 1,000 no's. I would have moved on, like not for nothing. My method is MVP 90 days. Right? So if I start a new business, I try to get a paying client in 90 days as proof of concept. No matter what they pay, 199, 99 cents, doesn't matter. But if I can't get a paying client in 99 days, then I assume the market doesn't want it. I'm gone. Like I don't have time, right? Homeboy was there for 6 months, 1,000 no's, and then he stumbled across this coffee shop that had a bunch of coffee snobs there, right? And it clicked like, oh, this needs to be like a cigar aficionado. It needs to be like that type of thing. And so they knew what Kenyan coffee was because they treat it like wine. They know where all the best vintages are. They know where all the stuff is. And this place had a bakery, and they would roast coffee 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and you'd smell that roasted coffee, from off the street. And then they had these pastries that they served, and their coffee was, $10 a small cup of coffee, one of those places, right? And he realized that's the niche. That's what I need to go after. So he started identifying those places, and the conversations were so much easier because they knew what Kenyan coffee was, right? They understood, like they know what Kona is, and they know what Jamaican Blue Mountain is, and they know what Ugandan, and they know coffee started in Ethiopia, like those people, not the Folgers people, you know what I mean? So once he figured out those were the people, he started contacting them. And that's when it started actually working for him. And then he contacted XM Bank. XM Bank did their due diligence. They ended up offering all the American clients working line of capital, which is amazing to the business owner. Like, I just got a new government backed, line of working capital for my business. That's amazing, right? So that came from this guy who's trying to sell you some of the best coffee beans in the world, right? There's now this government agency involved, so that adds credibility, right? If the government agency does its due diligence. They backed all the funding for the deal. Deal went through, and he went from Dunkin' Donuts, assistant manager who felt like a loser internally, right? Obviously, that was not, but he went from that to I now have $1.27 million, in my pocket. Mind you, he did all that work where? What does that mean for foreign earned income exclusion? Of your first $130,000 that you make in another country is excluded from taxes. Right? So things can happen once you make that move that aren't even possible in the United States. The United States literally incentivizes you to leave. Like the foreign earned income exclusion, you get now, I think it's $136,000. Go to the IRS and check, but it goes up every year. It's adjusted for inflation every year. So, so if you leave, you can make $130,000 tax exempt just because you made it, and it's earned income. So it's like your job money. You make $130,000 taxes just because you left the country. But if you live in the country, you're taxed on everything you make. So you're literally incentivized to leave. So I can make $130,000 a year tax free. Period. All right, because I left. If I was still there, that deal is no longer on the table. So yeah, it's definitely there for you. Where there's a will, there's a way for sure. And it's typically incredibly beneficial to people who do it if they have a team. Because if you don't have a team, the government will take your money. If you just pay your taxes because you don't know about the foreign earned income exclusion and your H&R Block person does not know, right? The girl from church who's been doing your taxes for the last 10 years does not know. You need somebody who's a specialist in foreign taxes, right? And the intersectionality between you being abroad and paying taxes. Those are the people who know. We had folks come out here, and it was the girl from church that does their taxes, and homegirl was like, "Oh, you owe 10,000 this year," and we're like, "No, you do not. Like we absolutely know based on the things that you have done." We absolutely know that you have more than a $10,000 credit out here, 100%. And there's so much emotional involvement with the girl from the church, and they paid the U.S. government $10,000 they didn't have to pay because they didn't go get because they didn't go get a specialist, and they didn't want to argue with their friend from church and get talked about in church, whatever the case is. But yeah, and then they had like some money hiccups down the road. You know what I mean? But some people really are kind of hard headed with that. As a school in Indiana, I think schools in Indiana are hiring. I don't know if that's advantageous though. Like typically stuff like that, it makes more sense for you to open your own because like tuition has to fit the locals. Like there are very few schools that are like so elite that it's like no locals or should be allowed to come here type of thing. And who wants to be part of that anyway? That's pretty common. And so if the local kids have to be able to afford the tuition in local billings, then like what's the best that you can possibly be paid, right? And so a lot of that, it becomes better if you open up your own, which you probably can afford to do though. Like right, like in the U.S., I wouldn't have been able to afford to like buy a law firm. I wouldn't have been able to like afford, like it wouldn't be realistic for me to be talking about like buying a hospital. It wouldn't have been realistic for me to be talking about like opening up a school, right? But it is realistic here. So, your ability to like open your own school and maybe even bring your own philosophy, because the international schools get to have their own curriculum. So when you like check out, and that's not just here. That's like when I lived in China, it was the same way, right? But when you have an international school, you can actually present an international curriculum, right? So like there's American international schools, there's Canadian international schools, French, German. There's a Belgium school somewhere around here. There's a Sino school. All the Sino schools are Chinese. I don't know what the Sino reference means. They're never called Chinese. They're always called Sino. So I don't know what that's about. But but all the Sino schools are Chinese schools. So like you can have your own curriculum, and run that through your school. So it actually it would make a lot more sense for you to start your own thing than for you to like get a job, unless you were getting a job at an international school and not for money but for connections. So like if you wanted to make connections in the Ministry of Education and you saw that like a real hoity-toity like school was hiring and you could get that job and then make those connections for a year and then go do you, that might make sense. don't know what that was about. Some comments in this live were filtered to protect the community experience. Y'all better stop playing. I don't even know what you wrote. TikTok didn't show it to anybody. So whoever you are, watch your mouth. I don't know. I don't know what you wrote. Oh man. Oh, that's a hard question. I think there's I'm trying to think. Like I think the best Cambridge school I think is ISK, International School of Kenya. Um but then there's like Waldorf schools, Montessori schools, so there's a bunch of different, you know what I mean? There's a bunch of different standards. So like the best, I don't know if there's a the best. I think it really depends. Like there's a Reggio Emilia school, so I think it just depends on what it is you're trying to get out of the education. It's probably a most expensive, but that doesn't necessarily make it the best. ISK are there's Cambridge, there's ISK, um, and then most of the rest of like our generational wealth folks, they go somewhere else. Because remember, a lot of the generational wealth folks aren't necessarily moving here. They're just doing their generational wealth from here, right? So, yeah. The best of any of our clients, we have one client whose kid goes to La Rose in Switzerland, which is crazy. You probably never heard of it, but it's like on a level above Ivy League. Like Harvard ain't got nothing on them. Yeah, like a Swiss Alps elite school. The trust, pays the tuition, which is not cheap. La Rose Academy. Yeah, La Rose. Yeah, no, most people have never heard it. It's like one of the top schools in the world. And they have like weird admission policies. Like so one of the things with the generational wealth that actually worked towards their advantage is they have the passport portfolios. Right? So if you have a passport portfolio, you have multiple nationalities. You are a multinational, not just like a multinational corporation, right? You're a multinational yourself. So La Rose, my understanding was they only take so many kids from each country. It's like two kids per country, right? So having a passport portfolio, now all of a sudden you could be like, okay, let me be one of the. No, we're not doing that. That's going to be Elon Musk's kid and Bill Gates' kid. Okay, fine. Let me be one of the two kids from Kenya. No, that's Ruto's kid and Jomo and Kenyatta's kid. Okay, fine. Well, let me be one of the two from Vanuatu. Vanuatu, which country is that? We ain't got no kids from Vanuatu. Okay, you're in, right? So having the passport portfolio actually assisted them in getting in because they only take so many kids from each country, which is crazy. Elite schools do it different. Yes, Vanuatu is a real country. It's an A though. Maybe my pronunciation made you think it was an E. It's an A, Vanuatu. And yes, most of our passport portfolio people do have a Vanuatu passport. Sounds uber wealthy. Nah, actually, most of our people, like generational wealth stuff, is for people who have no generational wealth. So asset protection trust, if you hear somebody say, "Oh, I need an asset protection offshore trust," that's yeah, you got at least $300 million, right? But generational wealth means I don't got it, but I'm going to use math, I'm going to use compounding to get it. So most of our generational wealth trusts like 10 grand, right? Now we do have some exceptions that like we've had some folks who they were old, they had a bunch of money. They knew like the one guy, it was kind of a shit show. The husband had ALS and the wife had MS, right? And so they knew that there was only so much time left. They did like $150,000. But this is like their 60 years of you know what I mean, retirement money and all of that. Their house is paid off and they know they got 6 months to live, right? And they're setting up stuff for the grandkid. That's very rare, right? But their trust made money quick because they put over 6 figures in it to get it started. But most of our folks, they're putting like 4 figures in it to get it started. They're not, it ain't nothing crazy like that. But yes, if you hear asset protection, you need assets to be protected, right? It's not, that's a different situation where, yeah, you're talking, I would like not even do an asset protection structure for somebody who had less than $300,000 in assets that were being protected. Because like the cost of setting it up, it doesn't justify it. Hey, Marcel, it doesn't justify it unless you have X amount of, assets to protect. But generational wealth, you're literally just compounding. Like all you're doing is you have your trust structure set up to protect from any kind of external attacks, right? So like if you get in a car accident, right? Like we're not talking about like Hollywood attacks, like normal stuff. Like you get in a regular car accident and the person sues you and your auto insurance doesn't cover it and you don't have an umbrella policy. What's an umbrella policy? You're a regular person. You're not a business. You don't even know what that is, right? So the money above and beyond what the insurance pays, they're now coming after you personally, right? Now, if you had your generational wealth in a high yield savings account or something like that, in America, and they win that lawsuit, they might be able to go after, like it's yours, you own it, right? So it's one of your assets, they go take it from you. Even if you did have a trust and it was in the trust, if the trust wasn't seasoned, right, which can be anywhere between 2 years and 10 years depending on the jurisdiction you made the trust in, if the trust hadn't been open long enough, which they call seasoning typically, they might be able to break that trust and go in there and take it anyway, right? So that's why we do offshore, so that even if they do attempt to like break that trust, there's a bunch of different layers in place where the trust just says no, right? You comply with all, court, orders and all of that, and you make all the requests that the court might ask you to make, and requests for distribution and requests for dissolution and all of that stuff. You do all of that, but the trustee will be able to tell you no, right? Because they're in another jurisdiction. And so that's a very high level simplification, but that's how the protection essentially works. And that's the only reason why it's offshore, is for that protection. But it's not like there's millions of dollars in there, right? They'll typically start with, I don't know, somewhere like $3,000 or $4,000, and then they'll compound that $3,000 or $4,000. The first compound will be the ultra high ROI bonds that exist here in Kenya. So they'll be getting 14, 15, 16% a month on that money. And then that payout, the 16% that gets paid out into the trust, the trustee will now then take that and reinvest it into like the regular market. So the capital is protected. The capital preservation, 100% protected because it's in treasury bonds. So at the end of the term of the bond, you get the capital back tax free, right? So capital preservation is taken care of. Your capital is 100% protected. So then you start doing the riskier stuff with the ROI from the capital. And that's how they build it. That's how they build the generational wealth. So yeah, 16%. Yeah, it's crazy, crazy, crazy. Definitely look that up. Definitely. If right now the best one, which just paid out this month, actually, is the, what is it called? The IFB one 2024 8.5. That's the name of the bond, right? It pays out 18.4607% annually. That's crazy. That's double the S&P 500. It's crazy on a bond, right? So that's, what our people are doing essentially, is they're just taking a little bit of money and they're compounding it for the next 30 years, and then the grand actually have generational wealth, right? So, depending on what you start with, the more you start with, the more you get. Like those guys that the old folks that actually dropped 6 figures in there, I want to say it's projected at 3.7 million in 20 years, but they started with such a large amount of money, right? And of course they do have the 18.47%. So you think about that, 18, let's just leave it at 18. Let's get rid of the change. And that's a tax exempt bond. An infrastructure bond is tax exempt on this side, right? So, right. But if it's 18%, then you're talking about, if you have like when we convert them into Kenyan shillings. So if you have a million Kenyan shillings, you're talking about 180,000 a year on that million, right? Because 18%. And so it's about, I'm going to say nine. Well, nine is more, but it's about $9,000 to a million shillings, right? So, do the math, right? So if they put 100,000 in, which they put more than that in, and they're getting 18% on that, it's pretty crazy just on the 18%. And then the trustee is now reinvesting the 18% into special funds. Special funds are literally the same thing as, except in America to join a hedge fund you need a million plus typically, right? Here you don't need. I think you need like 50,000 or something like that in local currencies. That's like, I don't know, 500. That's not even $500. Like $400, right? So there's a fund called Arvo Cap, right? Go ahead and Google it. Arvo Cap Special Fund. Arvo Cap did 60% ROI on their hedge fund last year. 60% ROI. After performance bonuses and all that, they got paid out 44% ROI last year alone, right? There's the one called Oak Special Fund. They got 22% last year. There's another one called Mansa X Special Fund. They got 20% last year, right? Right? These folks are already getting 18%, and then on top of the 18%, they're getting, another 60% if they did ArvoCap. They're getting another 20% if they did Mansa X. They're getting another 22% if they did Oak Special. So that's how it works. And then by the time the kids are ready to inherit the generational wealth, boom, they got millions. Even though the person who started it was a regular Joe, probably died poor, didn't have nothing. But that's how it always works. The first Kennedy died poor. The first Rothschild died poor. Like, that's how it works. Oh, is that what that was? Oh, thank you. But yeah, so that's how it works. Classy. Yeah, no problem. I can't wait to talk to you actually, property. Definitely. We'll make it happen. Yeah. I'm from Kenya, and I live in Kenya. I'm from Philadelphia, though. The Philly area, anyway. So hopefully that gave you like a solid little breakdown. And hopefully you're Googling a bunch of stuff. Would you never? Me personally, I would never. I understand that there are people who have like entrenched families and like, yeah, I get that. But my dad just passed like 3 months ago, and that was the last like tether. So like, yes, there I got cousins and stuff and all of that, but they can come to the beach. You know what I mean? I don't need to go. I don't need to go to cold Philadelphia, maybe be in the snow or something like that to go see them. They can come to the beach. But yeah, I don't have any intention of ever going back because I'm not missing anything. Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah, we expected it. He had COPD, so we expected it for a while, but it still was crazy when it happened. I probably do have to go back. There's probably some estate stuff that I got to go handle, so I probably will go back relatively soon because of that. But outside of that, no. Hey, thanks, Kamoni. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I feel like so I lived in the Philippines for a while as an expat, so that was always temporary, but it wouldn't have been the same. Like I'd have went back because you lose, right? Like you lose lifestyle in certain places. Here, I don't lose any lifestyle. You know what I mean? So everything that I'm used to, I get here, right? Some things I get more of here, like healthcare. So yeah, there'd be no reason for me to go back. It's the same thing in China. Like the only difference with China was language, but I was actually quite happy in China, right? So, and it's the same thing. Like I didn't necessarily lose anything lifestyle wise, but culture is so different that even though you're not losing things lifestyle wise, you're kind of losing some things culturally, right? So like, yeah, you can afford to like go out to the restaurants and all, but what they serve, you know what I mean? And so while I love Chinese food and like whatever, still you're in a very alien environment. You even though like I learned Chinese on the fly and I was able to speak it pretty conversationally, I'm sure I sounded like a 7 year old. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure because my vocabulary wasn't that great or anything like that. So there's that. And so yeah, I mean, there's a difference when you when you don't when the language is different and there's a learning curve and all of that stuff. So there's some difference there. But and yeah, Thailand definitely better than yeah. And so but for here, I don't lose anything. The native language is English. Their official language is English. Yeah. They have a dual official language, English and Swahili, but like literally, you have to take English in school. So there's like English class and Swahili class. And like at home, people learn like their tribal language. So most people are trilingual. They speak Swahili, they speak English, and then like whatever they come from. So if they're like Kikuyu, they speak Kikuyu, Swahili, and English. Or if they're like my wife is from a tribe called Meru. She speaks Meru, Swahili, English, but some tribes are related. So like Merus can understand Mbus and they can understand Kikuyus. You know what I mean? So like, you know, did you like Thailand better than China? No, China was definitely better. Now I like Singapore better than China, but Singapore can be expensive. I think you know what Singapore just is expensive. Let me not sugarcoat this, right? Let me put it where the ghost can get at it. Singapore is expensive. Singapore is just like Hong Kong. It's expensive, but Singapore, man, Singapore makes you feel good for all the wrong reasons, right? So Singapore kind of has this like communist control thing going on, but they do it for the people for real, right? Like it's really for the benefit of the people. So it's one of those things where you actually kind of lull yourself into like, let me let the government take control and let me do let me do what they're saying to do because they actually care about me. That's the only government I've ever encountered that legit like they had a law. It was interesting and it worked, but they had a law where in order to be eligible for like government housing, which like 70% of the country, if not more, I mean, it might be 90%, has government sponsored housing, right? Like they have like condos and stuff, and it's like, what we would call like a project, right? Except they're very nice, right? And so, but there was a law that whatever the ethnic makeup of the country was, that has to be the ethnic makeup in every single apartment complex. So if it's 2% African American or 2% African, 2% Indian, whatever the ethnic makeup of the country is, that's what your apartment complex got to look like. And so like xenophobia doesn't exist out there. And that came from like the government forcing you to live near. Like imagine Americans, you're going to tell me where I got to live. You're going to tell me who got to be in my, you know what I mean? But it worked. It was for the benefit of the people and it actually worked. So it's one of these things where it's like, it does feel like communism, but it feels like the communists actually love you. Like they actually care about you. Right. And so it's a really interesting place to be. It really, really is. Cause like it's the perfect example of giving up freedom for security and it working. Now they may get a bad leader in a generation or two, and then it'd be the worst example in history. But for right now, it works. Is it as expensive as Switzerland? No, nothing's as it. Switzerland is an island country and on the mainland. Switzerland, Switzerland acts like it imports everything and it's on the so I don't know why. Switzerland is Switzerland, but Switzerland is prohibitively priced. So no. I mean, of course, we all have our Manhattans, right? So you can find a place that's more expensive, but in general, no. And Switzerland, I mean, you never know what language you're going to speak either. Some people speak Russian, some people speak French. It's such a it's such a hassle. Yeah, yeah, but I mean, if you got a family office, though, it makes sense to put your family office in Singapore. It really, really does. They have so many incentives. It makes a lot of sense. But I mean, you got to have it has to be a true single family office. It can't be a multi-family office because some of the stuff that you have to do, like what is it? I think I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think you need at least 30 million in assets that are um that are under management with the family office. So it's significant, but you get something for that. You know what I mean? I'm learning about the U.S. So that could be a real concern. It depends on what you're actually planning to do, because if you're planning to relocate, that doesn't matter, right? Then if you're planning to relocate, then your spending power here is what matters, right? If you're not, if you're planning to manage it abroad, then you got to see what the difference in the points is. And we typically do that apples to apples, right? So like we'll look at, okay, what would your coupon rate be for a US savings bond? And then you look at it, it's like 4%. Okay, so you got 4% on your US savings bond. What would your coupon be on your Kenyan savings bond? Okay, it's 13%. All right, cool. So we got 13%. So 13 minus 4, right? So there's 9 points of foreign exchange variance that you can experience without losing you would have gotten in the US, right? So that's your baseline, right? And then but it's so extreme that even with the currency fluctuations, maybe you come out 10%. 10% is still the historical average for the S&P 500. So now you're getting S&P 500 returns with no market volatility, right? So it's like, you just got to figure out where that's going. If the currency in Kenya goes up and the U.S. goes down, or yeah, it does, but it's just that range, right? There's such a dramatic difference in the ROI range that like you're typically okay no matter what. You know what I mean? It would have to be pretty crazy for it to go down 9 basis points. You know what I mean? Um, Even within 20 years, that would mean that like Kenya crashed, you know, or even the United States like fully like crashed, like became a third world country in the next 20 years, which I don't see that happening. I do see, issues with currency and all of that, but I don't see that happening. All right. Yeah, no, but not in basis though, right? So like if you have like a euro bond, your euro bond isn't 16%, diluted in the last 13 months, right? So that's what I'm talking about is like in your global financial market basis points, it hasn't done that. So like in your standards and poors and your Moody's and all that, it's done that. Yeah, and like the credit rating, it's done that, sure. But too many people still hold US debt, right? Too many people are still propping up their economy on that US debt. So to replace that, it's going to be a very slow, very slow progress. Yes, the bond is going to give you that same ROI throughout the entire maturity, no matter what. So there's no fluctuation in the ROI of the bond. So the only, like I said, now if you're living here, it doesn't matter at all, right? Because you're getting paid out in local currency, and it's the buying power of the local currency locally. But if you're not living here and you're repatriating the money back to the U.S., number one, there's some things that you probably have to do to not get hit with crazy taxes. But upon repatriation, that's where you're going to get your difference. So then, like the only apples to apples way to look at that is bond to bond. Like you can't be like, well, what would I have made on Google stock? You know what I mean? That's apples and oranges. So you'd have to say, all right, if I had a U.S. Treasury bond and this Kenyan Treasury bond, apples to apples, did I lose? And so because the U.S. Treasury bonds coupon payment started at 4%, and the Kenyan Treasury bonds coupon payment started at 13%, you have that entire variance before you start losing. You know what I mean? So it's really difficult to do that currently. It's not difficult for that to happen in general. You're right. Your concern is correct. Right? But but currently with the special circumstance of Kenya and how high the ROI is on their bonds, it really takes a significant event for you to lose on that. Again, apples to apples. Uh-huh. Yep. You're absolutely correct because typically it's low risk and it's low reward, which is exactly what it is in the United States. A bond has super low risk, and so it only pays out 4%, right? And that's typically what a bond is. And so you're absolutely right. Somebody lives until they're 65. Now they got their lump sum of retirement money, and they still want to keep making money on their money because they understand that inflation will kill them if they don't. They can't just put it in a savings account, but they also don't want a stock market crash to wipe them out at the age of 70 when they can't work anymore. So they buy bonds. You're absolutely 100% correct. The special circumstance of Kenyan bonds is that they trade between 12% and 18%, right? So you're actually getting stock market returns with bond security, right? And that's because they're going from an emerging market, from a tier two market. They're already past tier three, right? They're not, a tier three market. So they're going from an emerging market, tier two to tier one. They're building a nuclear power plant right now. They're building a brand new international airport right now. They have geothermal plants happening in the Rift Valley right now, right? So they're going from tier two to tier one, right, to first world country status or developed, country status right now, right? And they expect that to be done in the next 15 years, right? So there's this pathway to, developed country, status in the next 15 years. And that's why there's this, need for cash. And that's what, when bond rates go up, that's what it means. It means the government is looking for cash. And that's essentially it. Is the government stable? I think it is. I think it is. I don't see any markers of instability in the government. Even they had their riots in 2024 over a finance bill. Number one, they acquiesced to the people and they did what the people asked them to do, which ended those riots. And number two, they handled it as well as any government could and quite quickly. It was like a couple weeks from the start of the rumblings to like the end of like whatever. And there were like with every government, there were human rights violations and police got out of hand and this and that and whatever. Like the same thing that would happen in the U.S. or anywhere else. But they actually handled it pretty well, and now have moved on from it. So it seems like they're stable. All the markers that we can see being on the ground indicate stability. They are creating, they are creating jobs, so job growth is accelerating. Some of like the unskilled workers might not see it because a lot of the growth is in skilled labor. But they even did a thing where they took a significant number of unskilled laborers and like did a deal to get them jobs abroad. So they actually like they did a U.S. deal, and I think they sent teachers to the U.S. They sent some other group to the U.K. or not the U.K. but the European Union and all of that stuff. So how long has it been stable? It's been stable since 2007. Yeah, it's been stable since 2007. It's been independent since like. And the incident in 2007 was the only incident of instability since the civil rights movement where they gained their independence. So they gained their independence as long as we gained our Voters' Rights Act. Like that they've only been a country that long and they're already almost a first world country. So, you know, infrastructure, infrastructure. Ghana just doesn't have the infrastructure that we needed. That doesn't mean that Ghana can't be great for like some other people, right? But for us, there was no way. Yeah, we couldn't do it. Just Ghana. So, and I had even heard that I don't know if he's a president or a prime minister, but the leader of Ghana, when they did the year of return, his cabinet didn't even know about it, right? And that's just people on the ground in Ghana who have connection with that old government, telling me that. But they did this big marketing campaign, and I'll give it to them. The marketing was the bomb, right? And African Americans was on it. They showed up, and there was nothing, no infrastructure, nothing to support them, no integration program, nothing, right? Like Kenya has like an ADA. Obviously, ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities, so it's not called the ADA. But Kenya has one, right? So like you come here, you have a disability. There's a system set up for you that gives you the extra things, and you don't have to pay taxes, and you can get the special vehicle because you don't have legs or like whatever. You know what I mean? Whereas like a lot of these things were just not in place at all. Nigeria, man. So I have a business partner, or really more of a friend. We don't do a whole lot of business together, but she does a lot of serious business in Nigeria, and she's okay. Like, but she has a Nigerian husband, so I'm sure that helps. Um, we went to Nigeria to do due diligence, and it was horrific. Like we ended the due diligence early and like left. Like it was horrific. Like we got there and officials, like Nigerian police, were like, "Where are you from? Give us money." And we were like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like these were the cops, and they were like aggressive. So it became like a scary thing because we're like, "Well, these are cops." And you know how cops treat black folks in the United States. So we're like, well, wait a minute. Are we about to die if we don't give you money? Are we going to jail on some trumped up charge? You're going to drop a baggie and frame us? Or like, what's going on here? And, so they were wild with the corruption and due diligence. Had already changed our tickets and left. It was crazy. Um, then we came back as a firm that had been hired by this group that was doing a pharmaceutical manufacturing company, right? They were all black. They weren't all directly from Africa, but they were all black. And they were tired of like expired Indian pharmaceuticals. And they all worked for like the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the US. So there was like somebody from Merck. There was somebody from, oh, what's that place called? There was a company I had never heard of. And then when I ended up doing the due diligence for the deal, I realized they're like one of the top three companies, and now I can't even think of their name. But anyway, there was some people from Merck, there was some people from Pfizer, there was people from Johnson and Johnson, and then there was this third one that's name eludes me, but they're actually like a superpower in pharmaceuticals. Two of those four people were born. No, not Moderna. They were born in Nigeria. So we had two Nigerians. So 50% of the ownership was Nigerian. We could not get that deal done in Nigeria. It's crazy, crazy. So that deal actually got done in Sierra Leone, and none of them were from Sierra Leone. There was one Kenyan founder, one Grenadian founder, and two Nigerian founders. Not like Nigerian Americans. They were born in Nigeria, and they could not get that deal done without massive bribes. So crazy, crazy, crazy. Tanzania, ugh. Tanzania just passed a rule that foreigners can't engage in certain industries, and amongst those industries were SMEs. So think about that for a minute. If you're Hilton, welcome in. You're a big company. You're not an SME. Welcome in. Come open up your Hilton hotel. But if it's you that wants a black-owned hotel that treat black people and Tanzanian people with respect, that maybe is an homage to African history. Oh no. That's an SME. You're not allowed to own that. That's a small hotel. What? What are you talking? Like, why wouldn't you be like, foreigners can't own large business? They can only own SME. The whole thing is so crazy. So Tanzania, I would never. So, but again, there might be somebody who that makes all the sense in the world to them, and so they go do that. But for us, after we got through 34 other African countries, the only one that made any kind of sense was Kenya. So, and at the time, if you go back and you look at what's called the Ease of Doing Business score, which was issued by the World Bank, Kenya's always been in the top 3 to 5. I think there was a year when people were doing like tech initiatives where it got dropped down to five because the country's doing the tech initiatives. Essentially, just open the door and let anybody with a tech company come in for free, essentially. So then it was easier for those companies to do business. Yeah. But it was Kenya was number one for a very long time, and then Seychelles and Mauritius decided to compete with British Virgin Islands from a banking standpoint. So then they became number one and number two, and then that's it. South Africa is very hard to do business in, but again, not everybody is a business owner, right? So there are people where South Africa is the better option for them. So that just not for us. And South Africa has the best IP laws. So if you're an IP firm, then you probably do want to do business in South Africa. So it just really depends. If you wanna do a vineyard, try to buy one in South Africa. And now, if you can't buy one in South Africa, then there's probably better countries to start a new one in. But if you can buy a South African vineyard and acquire it, do that. Absolutely, if that's your goal. So that there are folks where that makes sense. Just it wasn't for me. Now Sierra Leone, I liked it. Sierra Leone made a lot of sense, but they don't have the infrastructure. Right? So I've always like when I left the United States, black women were dying in childbirth. This has been something I've been trying to get together, and it's not my area of expertise, so it's taking a long time, right? But I've been trying to build a hospital that focuses a maternity hospital that focuses on black women being safe in childbirth. Um, and so at the time when we were looking at Sierra Leone, we couldn't do it. So it was like, ugh, in order for us to build that hospital there, they just didn't have the infrastructure. And it's a maternity hospital with a state of the art NICU. We can't lose power. We can't lose power in a NICU. You know what I mean? Like we just can't do it. So yeah, sometimes infrastructure matters. Ahmed, can I exchange a U.S. bond for a Kenyan bond? Maybe. So in order to do that, it would have to be a secondary market transaction. So you would have to pay because it kind of sounds like you want to do it as a clean exchange and not pay nothing. You'd have to pay a broker because you'd be working with the secondary market. One thing about bonds is they're not liquid, right? So a bond has a maturity, and until the maturity, they're typically not liquid. So if you sell it before the maturity, you got to sell it on the secondary market. Now, if you got a broker involved and tried to assign ownership of a U.S. bond to a foreign person who, for whatever reason, wanted to hold the U.S. security, and in exchange for a Kenyan bond, that might be something that a broker could broker for you, right? But now there's that cost in between to deal with that broker because you're talking about secondary markets at that point. So so no, there's no like direct. I just hand somebody a bond. At least not a government bond, right? Like if you have a corporate bond, then there might be different rules there set up by the corporation. How long have you been in Kenya? For example, over 10 years. Has the bond market been stable? Yes, but bond markets, they fluctuate just like any other markets, right? So bonds go up when the demand for money is high, right? And that's why emerging markets have great bond ROI, right? There are even other African countries that have higher ROIs in percentage, but their cost of living is higher, so it balances out. But yeah, it has been. However, we expect that after like 2007, the bond rates to go back down. We expect them to go back down to like 7%, maybe even as low as like a US bond rate, 4%, if they have all the money they need. So it is time sensitive in the sense that, the bond market can correct at any time. Yeah, 2027. Yep. Yeah, that's what we expect. This pure speculation on our part. Maybe 2027 comes and it doesn't happen, right? So, but we expect that after 2027, the bond market will normalize, or there'll be like a bond market correction. Now, that doesn't affect anybody who already owns bonds. So, Precious metals, any in the generational wealth portfolio. Yeah. Once, so the bonds are typically the base of generational wealth. What ends up happening is in the trust deed, they will decide how they want to proceed with any kind of future investment. So some people have it like broken down in percentages. Like when that money comes out of the bond, 10% will go into real estate, 10% will go into like high risk, blue chips, 20% will go into precious metals, So like some of them have it cut up, that tight where there's, percentages. Other people have it where the trustee has to present a plan for the year. So there has to be like a yearly, investment plan, and they have to present that plan. It has to be approved by the beneficiaries, and then they execute, right? So you can set up a trust is probably the most customizable legal document in existence. I can't think of a more customizable legal document. Maybe a prenup, maybe a prenup, but even there are like guidelines. You can actually design a trust that's actually illegal, and that trust will still be registered. You know what I mean? Like obviously, if the trustee follows through, it obviously opens up the door for the trust to be busted open. You can't really do an unenforceable prenup. I mean, I suppose you could, but the other side would know it was unenforceable, right? Because there are two parties, respectively in that prenup. So as far as the most customizable legal document, I would say the trust is probably at the top of that list, or at least in the top three. Right, and so you can set that up any way you want it to be. You can definitely have a focus. We have people who have a focus on crypto. We have people who have a focus on gold specifically. We have people who have a focus on rhodium because it's more precious, but they like metals, and so there's you can do anything you want to do any way you want to do it. Why is it so high right now? Because they're going from tier 2 to tier 1. Because they're building a nuclear power plant right now and they need money to do it. Because they're building a brand new international airport right now and they need money to do it. And, so on and so forth. No self-settling trust in the U.S. unless, yeah. No, definitely, I hear you on that. A lot of the U.S. is typically more restrictive, and that's why you don't see like international people doing their international trust in the U.S. Right? So like, it's obvious that if you're doing an international trust and you're a U.S. citizen, it has to be elsewhere than the U.S. But you don't see like British people doing their offshore asset protection trust in the U.S. in general, right? Just because of it's a bit more restrictive and the self-dealing rules and all that stuff, and the IRS gets involved. Nobody really wants the IRS involved if the IRS doesn't have to be involved. So typically you don't see a lot of that. If there's a U.S. trust from a non-U.S. person, at least in our experience, there's also a company. There's also a company doing business in the U.S. or a U.S. company, that's in play as well, for the most part. So yeah, you're definitely right, especially with IRS rules and IRS tests. IRS love tests. There's always these tests that figure out whether you can do control test and self-dealing test and all these tests. So most people avoid the IRS if they can. Unfortunately, if you have a U.S. passport, you're not avoiding them unless you give up that U.S. passport. There is St. Kitts. U.S. Virgin Islands are interesting, and even like Guam and all of that. Like territories are interesting for very specific, I suppose. Holdings or whatever. But there's Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's attractive now if you move there and all of that. So like of course there are exceptions that prove the rule, I suppose. But yeah, it used to be British Virgin Islands and Switzerland. I'm trying to think. There was another one. They were like the gold standard for a very long time. I can't even think what the third one was. Now that's movie stuff. Like the British Virgin Islands, highly reduced. Swiss banks will typically not even deal with Americans anymore, so you have to create a structure, some kind of special purpose vehicle to even engage them. There's very few banks over there that'll deal with Americans, and then they have a minimum. Like if they decide to deal with Americans, they have a minimum amount of money that you got to put up in there for them to even do that. So that's pretty much like the Swiss offshore bank account and all of that stuff that's invisible and all. That's pretty much movie stuff at this point. It was real in the 70s, but that's pretty much movie stuff at this point. So like other countries have stepped up. So you got Nevis that has stepped up in a big way. You got Cook Islands stepped up in a big way. Now you got Singapore went in direct competition with those guys, stepped up in a big way. You got Seychelles that went so far as to allow themselves to be gray listed for protection purposes, right? So like they protect their identity so much so that countries put them on a list like, well, they're protecting identity so well that who knows, it could be terrorists or who knows, it could be drug dealers, or you know what I mean? So they actually put themselves in that situation just to protect identity, right? Mauritius also, you know. So you got these countries that said, you know what, as part of our economic framework, we're going to go ahead and take the place of these kind of tax havens and you know and money havens and offshore trust nexuses, and then what ends up happening is you typically have to hire somebody as part of like the law. You typically have to hire somebody, maybe not a trustee, but you got to hire somebody. They might be like the agent, or they might be your settler, depending on which country it is, but it creates some sort of income for the locals, right? And then of course, you can bank there, and so that pads their local banking industry and all of that. So definitely, if you are a regular person, you will still have to pay money to maintain it annually. That adds up. Yeah, you do, but it just depends on where you are, right? Like, so like our people, there's a reason we use Kenya, right? And I didn't mention Kenya in any of those, you know what I mean? So for asset protection, you don't need asset protection unless you have assets, right? So from that asset protection standpoint, like you got it annually, or else why are you talking to us, right? So like that's the attitude that they're taking. Like if you ain't got the assets, why are we having a conversation, right? Singapore is really, really good for that. Like they will ask you in the beginning of the conversation, you got $100 million? Why are we talking then? Like, don't talk to me, go talk to these guys, right? And so in asset protection, it's if you don't have the assets, you don't need the protection, so it makes sense. In generational wealth, which is why we use places like Kenya, you choose places that have very little upkeep, right? So like what does your upkeep cost in Kenya, right? Annually for your trust? Maybe $200, maybe, right? Because the only thing you're actually paying in your upkeep is you're paying your CPA, right, to file your taxes, and you're filing. There's a BRS annual review, so like that's your like corporate annual review because trusts are incorporated in Kenya, right? So there's a corporate annual thing that you do there. You file that. That costs maybe $100 to file, and you pay your CPA. Maybe it costs another $100 to pay the CPA, right? And if your trust is doing what it's supposed to be doing, the trust can cover it, right? And that's considered deductible towards the trust in the current tax regime, right? So those monies that you pay for that, they're deductions against the income that the trust has made. That's it. Right now, can you create other annual maintenance fees? Yeah, like if you buy a piece of property as an investment, and that piece of property is paying into the trust as an investment. Well, of course, there are maintenance costs when it comes to property, but those maintenance costs are deductible, right? So you can deduct those. For us, we try to do foreign settled, foreign non-grantor trusts, right? So there's a whole big, IP situation there. As I'm not going to get into exactly how we do it, but typically what we end up with for non-grantor trust. Now, some people purposely have a grantor trust. That is a nightmare from my perspective. But for them, it's not. That's the reason why they choose it, because they already have all these trust structures and they already got to deal with the IRS in that way. So it's not a nightmare for them, and they just take a grantor trust and then they pay all the stuff they got to pay and do all the filings and the FinCEN and all of that stuff, right? But for our folks that are doing non-grantor trusts, they're foreign settled, foreign controlled, non-grantor trusts. Like I'm an American, so I can't control it. I don't even control the company that controls it, right? So no Americans touch it, no Americans settle it, no American assets are granted into it, right? And that's why the bond ladders are so effective, right? Because the trustee company can go ahead and create the bond ladder and settle the bond ladder into the trust, and the bond ladder is making payments from Kenya to this Kenyan trust. You're not the trustee. You're not the beneficiary. Remember, it's a generational wealth trust. So your grandkids who aren't even born yet are the beneficiaries, right? And so, like I said, the IRS and its tests, right? So you have to be able to pass the control test. There's no direct control. There's 3 other tests that you have to be able to pass, right? With the IRS to make that all work. But that's why we routinely say for a lot of our trust clients, the trust does not benefit that first generation of generational wealth. They don't benefit at all. It is real generational wealth. It is for the next generation. We can set up your own personal wealth plan and make you generate, make you benefit from that. But for those generational wealth people, they don't do that. What if you only want a trust for yourself? You can do that. But if you want the trust for yourself, we can still set it up where it's one of these situations where it's like foreign controlled and all that. But the instant you get a distribution, you now have to go do, what is it, form 3450 or whatever. Don't quote me on that, but you got to go file with the IRS, right? And so now all of a sudden the IRS is aware, and they try. What they'll do is they'll try to do a look through. They'll utilize the IRS. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into IP publicly here, but they'll utilize the Internal Revenue Code to see if they can look through your structure and pin it on you, right? As long as they can't, it's still a non-grantor trust. You're just a beneficiary. So every time you take a distribution, you have to file, that document with the IRS. You also have to do typically a FinCEN report, and you may have to do an FBAR, depending on how much money is in the foreign accounts. I think right now it's 10,000. So 10,000 or more, you got to do an FBAR. So they get in your business. That's what it boils down to. If you're doing it for yourself and you want to benefit from it, that's fine. But now it's part of your tax schema, right? And so income, 10K. Income from the trust is taxed on the U.S. side. There are ways around it though, right? Because your trust in Kenya can be incorporated. You could technically use the foreign dividends received deduction, which is 100% reduction unless they've changed the law in the big beautiful bill or whatever. But last we checked, it's 100% deduction, right? So it only works for C corp though. But if you have a C corp and that C corp owns 10% of the foreign company, and it's owned 10%, I believe, for 364 days, right? So 364 days, it owns 10% or more, and a dividend is now sent from the company to the C corp. That dividend is 100% tax exempt. Now, of course, there's other tax implications to get from the C corp to you, right? But there are people who already have C corps. Those C corps are already, producing whatever they're producing or operating, right? And so they already have the complexity of the tax setup of a C corp, and so it makes all the sense in the world for them to then do that foreign dividend received deduction and get a 100% tax deduction on dividends received and move money, repatriate money from the foreign trust company directly into their C corp in the U.S. and then do what they will from there. Also, the C corp can hold a certain amount of income over um, and not have that taxed, right? It doesn't have to be distributed every year or whatever. So it depends on that. It depends on that setup. Yes, there are simpler ways. It becomes incredibly simple if you move here. So the simplest thing is for the folks that want the trust that benefit them, they typically fall under the people who are relocating, right? So the folks who are relocating, it becomes much simpler, right? Because then you have FEIE, right? You have the foreign earned income exclusion. So you don't have to do a trust distribution. Remember, the trusts here are incorporated. So you don't have to do a trust distribution. It's still a corporation. So you can just be paid, right? And then if you're paid your first $136,000 a year or whatever it is right now, and it changes every year for inflation, is tax exempt, right? Because it's foreign earned income, right? So you can take a position with the company and just be paid directly and never have a distribution. That's fine, right? So if you move here, it extraordinarily simplifies things. Because even if you take a position with the trust, but you're in the United States, they won't pass the physical presence test. The IRS and their tests, right? So you can do it, right? But if you're challenged, right, and then you don't pass the test, right? So it becomes infinitely more simple for the relocatees, right? Now, if you're not relocating, can it be done? Yes, but that's on your side. That's a CPA on your side or an enrolled agent on your side or whatever that has to set that up because it's not just a matter of the federal taxes at that point. It's a matter of also the state taxes. So you got to be able to handle both of those. So you definitely need like a local professional, on that side. Here where I am, yes. In Kenya, no. Which is interesting because Kenya is on the equator, but elevation matters. So like Nairobi is actually has a high elevation. So there are nights when like you're shivering in Nairobi, even though it's on the equator. Here we're at the beach, so we're ocean level. So it's like 80 degrees on average. Sometimes you'll get 75 in the coldest months. You'll get 90 in the hottest months. We don't get 100 though, which is interesting because we're on the equator, but we don't get 100. So it actually gets hotter in New York in the summer, and obviously way colder in New York in the winter. Whereas we're kind of in the middle where it doesn't ever get too cold, but it also doesn't ever get too hot. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah, yeah. And there's like places like you go to Mount Kenya, you can have like a snowball fight because the elevation is so high. So it is pretty interesting. Ooh. My mother-in-law just arrived. But yeah, we'll talk to you soon. I guess I'll call it since my mother-in-law is here. I forgot there's a business trip happening. Um, Not for me, I'm not going, but my wife needs to do a business trip, and so mom is here to help with the baby. Do you have realty investment opportunities where you can live there partially? Yes. Yes. The only thing with that though, and it typically doesn't actually create an issue because of the investment side of it. But the only thing with that is that you have to have an investor permit. So that's a different requirement set, and part of that requirement set is $100,000 in a local bank account. It's not really a big deal for people doing the real estate stuff because typically whatever real estate they're doing is around that price tag anyway. So it works out for them. The 100,000 ends up being like prohibitive for people who are like trying to do a startup. So they're like, "Oh, I'm coming to Kenya to start a business." And they're like, "All right, cool. You're a business person. Let's see that $100,000, right?" And you're like, So, but for folks who are like investing in real estate, like we just built a duplex for a lady to do Airbnb and all of that. So she has her investor permit and all of that, and she can live there whenever she wants, and it's her, whatever. It costs more than 100,000 to build a duplex, so it's just a kill a bird, two birds with one stone situation. But it has to be done in order. You know what I mean? So of a timeshare, yeah, but then you would almost want to do the initial legwork as far as like getting other partners to be in on that timeshare with you, so that you guys could kind of all come in at the same, with the same 100,000 type of situation. So you could do that as well. Timeshares, there's not like a framework for it. Obviously, the contract can be written, and you can, you know what I mean. You can effectively create a timeshare, but it's not like a thing here. So you would be more looking at like arbitrage. See, which, as far as what people are doing out here. But if you're going to like buy a timeshare, then the timeshare part is like on your side. You know what I mean? So you would essentially like buy whatever, and then you would try to like run a timeshare business, which is not something that happens here very often. But people do the arbitrage thing where they rent, and then they, Airbnb and blah, blah, and then when they don't want an Airbnb, they can live there because they are paying rent. But yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. Just brainstorming it through. Yeah, absolutely. But we do have people they'll do like an LLC in the US, and have multiple members in there, and then come out here and do something similar or buy whatever. And then internally, we figured out how we're going to share like whatever. So that ends up, it's not from us, it ends up being from them. Yeah, we don't do it ourselves, Scepter. Yeah, you're right. All right. Well, yeah, yeah. Have a good day. I'll talk to you soon. Enjoy yourselves. And I don't know when I'm going live next, but definitely keep an eye on our YouTube. We're doing like much shorter, like this has been 2 hours. Wow. We are doing like 45-minute, 30-minute like snippets of just one thing. And so those are the new episodes that are coming out on the YouTube side. So yeah, keep an eye on that. And then we should be having snippets pop up on TikTok of those shows. Yeah, partial ownership. There's a lot of partial ownership. It's just that the owners typically work that out themselves. You know what I mean? But we're not opposed to like letting it be known, like on our social media, like, hey, we have a client that wants to do X, Y, and Z. Whoever is interested in that, email, this email, or contact us, and we'll put you in touch with them or whatever. So if you want to do like some kind of group, whatever, we don't have a problem like shouting that out. But we don't host anything currently. We have a sister company that isn't really active right now, but will become active in the next couple of months, that focuses on investment, and they will be hosting like syndications. But they're not active currently, but they will be active in a month or two. I don't want to deal with maintenance and contracting. Yeah. They'll be hosting syndications, and then you don't have to be a qualified investor because it's not going to be an American syndication. So anybody who wants to jump in will be able to jump in. All right, guys. I will see you later, and then we'll talk about that. On our thing. Even though it's another company, I'll like reference it or whatever if you remember, and we'll get you the information. All right, guys. Talk to you guys later. Thanks for hanging out with me. The Freedom family has definitely been in the building today. I will see you guys very, very soon. We do not have a live schedule because we switched to that show format, but I think I will do something. I think I'll like go live once a week, like on a schedule, just so you guys can catch me. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Thanks for hanging out with me.